Hi everyone, my name is Nick, and today it's time for another houseplant haul video. So today we're going to go over all of the plants I've acquired over this last month, the month of October 2020. And I'd say all of the plants I have to share with you guys this month are pretty interesting. They're all rare, uncommon houseplants. For the most part, there's a couple common ones that slipped in there, but they're all really interesting. So without further ado, let's go ahead and talk about them. So we're going to start off with the aroids that I acquired this month, and this first one is the Aglaonema chocolate. So this is an Aglaonema. It's a Chinese evergreen, but I think this is an imposter plant to Calathea ornata. If you look at these newer leaves, you can see that pink lines that they get through the leaves that looks just like the pinstripe Calathea or Calathea ornata. Very, very similar. The foliage is almost as dark. And I think it's quite interesting that some of this older foliage, it doesn't have that pink coloration on the front of the leaves. It does have it on the back. So I've only had this plant for a couple of weeks, so I'm not sure how this plant grows over time, but as it's an Aglaonema, I feel pretty confident I'm going to have it for a pretty long time since these things are pretty damn easy to grow. So I think we're going to have some pretty good luck there. Usually when I bring home my Aglaonemas, some of the lower leaves of the plant will turn yellow and fall off. I don't understand why. It happens literally every time I bring an Aglaonema home. It's probably because they're holding on to too much moisture, or they're not receiving as much light as they would have received in the greenhouse where they were growing. Regardless, they tend to acclimate very well after the fact, so usually I just hang on to the plant and give it what it wants while a couple of the leaves yellow, and we go from there. But really, that's happened on every single Aglaonema I've ever grown in my home, and I've grown a bunch of Aglaonemas, so if you have any tips there, I'd love to hear about that. But yeah, it's just something I wanted to make note of. But I actually got these in on the last shipment that I ever made, or the last order that I ever placed at Urban Jungle, which is kind of sad, but I had to make sure I got one of these to make sure I remember. And I also am really happy that I got them in my last shipment because I only ever got these in the store one other time, and I've been looking for them every week since, and that was like a year and a half ago. So I'm very psyched that on my last week I was able to get my hands on a really lovely plant. So this and one other plant I actually got from Urban on my last shipment, which I'm very excited about. So I'll share with you guys the other one now, which is also an aroid. So this is a Philodendron painted lady. So this is just a nice, funky, out there philodendron. Not the most rare, mind you, but it's definitely uncommon. Definitely hard to get your hands on nowadays. You wouldn't normally walk into a houseplant store and find these. This is more something you'd have to order online. But my broker was able to get these in very large abundance, and I really love it when plants that are hard to get your hands on are sold in such abundance. So yeah, I had to bring one of these home. This was actually a gift from Urban Jungle for me leaving, so I have to point out thank you guys from Urban for giving this to me. But I'm thrilled. This is such a beautiful houseplant. If you can see that variegation that the leaf gets, and they also have that nice vein down the center that if I flip it on the back, it's pink, and the petioles are pink. So I really like this plant. A couple little things about this plant that I really like. Of course, I've only had it for a couple of weeks, so we are going to have to get used to each other, and I'm going to have to make sure that I grow this plant to its fullest potential because, as I said, it was a gift from my last job. So I definitely would like to keep this one for a very, very long time because it's going to have a lot of memories attached, a lot of connotations. That's the word I'm looking for. It has a lot of connotations attached to it. So I love this plant. Gorgeous. I want to give it some more airtime, but I don't really have anything else to say about it. So I have one more aroid to talk about for this month's plant haul. This is a Monstera SUBPINNATA. So a very fun looking plant. It looks very similar to the Epidendrum zippolinium, which I have behind me here. I don't know if my camera is up that high that you can see it, but a very, very similar looking plant, and that's kind of what I love about it because once again, it's kind of like an imposter plant where this Monstera looks exactly like that Epidendrum, and I think that's just so incredible. But I love Monstera. I know that it's a very like basic houseplant these days, but I still think they're really cool. I love the splits. Whenever I go to a botanical garden and I see the Monsteras is climbing up super high and those leaves are larger than me, I just think it's so incredible. So a boy can dream, can't he? Although I know I'm probably never going to have anything like that in my home, but once again, it's just something I can strive for. So this one has a little bit of a runner growing, so I attached it to this tomato stake right here, and I don't know if it's going to do very much because my home isn't as humid as a greenhouse where these wood pieces would stay wet and the plants would like adhere to it. So I'm not positive if that's going to really make much of a difference for this plant, but I figured better than giving it nothing, you know what I mean? So hopefully something will happen with this, but once again, I've only had this one for a number of weeks, if not like a week at this point. So I will just have to get to know this plant. We'll have to get acclimated with each other, and hopefully it grows very well for me because it's a very interesting plant and a rather uncommon, rare, you could say, plant on the market. So yeah, I'm really excited to give this one a go. Okay, so let's move on today. I think the only other group I have to share is orchids. Oh my gosh, I don't think I ever really talked about orchids before here on my channel. And that's because I've never bought orchids before. I used to have a joke that I never paid for my orchids because they would just make their way to me. I used to like accumulate them from the bar that I used to work at a couple of years ago, and then I've gotten some from friends and from my roommate. So all of the orchids we had in our home prior were just ones that we've accumulated, but this is my first time ever purchasing orchids. I was at a greenhouse that I like to go to, and they had a couple that I was like, let me try it. I absolutely love when my orchids bloom. I have a Britonia orchid in my home that blooms every couple of months, and it smells like jasmine tea, and it's just lovely. So I'm like, why am I not growing more orchids? They're so cool. So this one right here is, I'm gonna have to look at the tag. It's a Epidendrum IBAGUENSE. Of course, I'll put the name on screen in case I'm pronouncing that wrong, but they called this the fiery reed orchid, and I also saw that they called this the poor man's orchid, which explains why this costed $5 and why like every other orchid I see cost like $50. So maybe that makes a little bit of sense, but it's a very interesting looking plant. I really like the way that epidendrums grow. I've seen them at like orchid shops, and they just like, you know, grow like this funkiness, and they can start to like trail. It's super cool. So I figured this would be a fun kind of orchid to get into, plus it being $5 doesn't hurt because that's, you know, a really good deal for plants these days. But yeah, I don't really grow any orchids except for the couple that I've just acquired, so I figured why not go out of my way to get an orchid. So that's exactly what we're doing. I really have not much knowledge on orchids. I grow most of my orchids in sphagnum moss, but I decided to go ahead and get some orchid bark to try growing these out in. I kind of prefer the moss, but people say good things about the bark too. I typically just use orchid bark in my soil mixes to make it more porous, but this is just straight up orchid bark in here. So yeah, I don't really know very much about orchids. Feel free to share some information if you have it. I would love to hear. And I did get another orchid because I couldn't just get one. You guys know how I am. I like my options. So this one, pardon me as I just pull it up real quick, is... Oh, I gotta watch my microphone. This is a coconut orchid. It's just very grassy. It does have just a very like simple like grass-like look. It reminds me kind of my Britonia orchid that I just mentioned, but with thinner leaves. And this apparently makes flowers that smell very fragrant of coconut, and I love coconut. So this is just a plant that fits me like a glove, so I'm really hoping that it does well. I literally am replicating the same exact care that I give my Britonia orchid with this one, where I'm literally hanging it directly in the window, and I'm letting it dry out for like 10 to 12 days before I go ahead and give it a nice soaking. But once again, I grow my Britonia in sphagnum moss, and I'm trying this one out in some orchid bark. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. When I purchased these orchids, they were growing in soil, and I know that most orchids don't grow in soil. There's some terrestrial orchids, like jewel orchids, that grow in soil, but I was feeling like these shouldn't be in soil, so I went ahead and made that change, but I didn't have the moss on hand, hence why I'm using the bark. So that's why I'm kind of asking if anybody has any tips. Feel free to share them with me. Really not much else to say about these orchids other than the fact that I'm really looking forward to them growing in my home, and hopefully that they bloom profusely, because that's exactly why I bought them. But that's not always how it works. Sometimes you kill your plants, sometimes they grow very slowly. We will take the steps that we need to take in order to hopefully make these plants flourish. So last but not least, we're going to talk about the odds and ends, so the plants that don't fit into any other group. And first off, let's talk about this Ficus triangularis. So, yeah. I don't love Ficus. I mean, I like Ficus, I just don't love Ficus. I don't really love the look of variegated Ficus, I'd say. I'm not like obsessed with the variegation, but I got these in at Urban Jungle soon before I left, and they were very inexpensive, and I usually see these very expensive, so it's kind of like that, like, am I not gonna buy this, or am I gonna buy it? So the answer was yes. I bought the plant. So I'm trying growing this under a grow light. Of course, you can see a little bit of browning. Not sure if it's a watering issue, if it's a lighting issue. I won't be devastated if I lose this plant because it wasn't very expensive, as I said, but it's funky looking. I think this plant has a lot of potential to grow like kind of like a bonsai, which I'm very interested in trying to do. I'm not going to bonsai this, mind you. I'm not going to do all of the steps necessary, but I'm just going to see how this grows in my home, and it looks like it's one that's going to stay a little bit more squat compared to like my other ficus eye, I don't know. But yeah, I think it's kind of interesting. Admittedly, I think this plant's kind of overrated. Like, I know this is a rather popular plant, but I'm just like not dying over it. But like I said, it was super inexpensive. I figured why not give it a try? Worst case scenario, I have a nice little ficus in a couple of years. You know what I mean? But yeah, I don't know too much. Ficus are very finicky, so that's why I'm not very particular about them. But people love them. They're popular houseplants for good reason, and I'm a good sport, so I always like to try the plant if I have the opportunity. I'm going to give the plant a go. So not much to say about this plant. Like I said, I'm growing it directly under a grow light. I'm giving it water probably like once a week. But from these brown edges, I'm not sure if I'm doing that right. But like I said, it could be light, it could be water, it could even be a humidity issue, it could be something else that I'm not even talking about today. So who knows what's going on? That's literally why I'm growing this plant, just because I would like to have the experience of growing this plant. I know people love it. Okay, so we have this plant right here. I'm gonna take off the plastic. This is a Peperomia Tinga Maria, and this is a very nice fuzzy peperomia. It kind of reminds me of like a fatter, fuzzier Peperomia trinervis, which I'm very fond of, so I think that's really cool. And it's super fuzzy. It's completely encased in fuzz. You know I like my fuzzy plants, so yeah, I really love this. It's got a nice size to it, like nice little like 4-inch plant. Got another thing coming off of here. You can see the little leaf that it was propagated from. I think it's really cool. This was a gift for my birthday from one of my friends, and I think it's really cool. They know I love Peperomia, so they found one that I never heard of before, and they hit that nail right on the head, because I have never heard of this thing I've never heard of this thing before, and if you cannot tell by me keeping a plastic bag over it that I have no idea what I'm doing with it, and I'm terrified I'm gonna kill it. And it's freaking gorgeous, so definitely looks like something that would thrive in like a close setting. It looks like it was meant to be in the rainforest. So I'm trying to do all I can to replicate those conditions, but this plant is really, really gorgeous. I had never heard of it before. So yeah, I'm gonna have to get a nice pot, but admittedly I'm scared to repot it because sometimes I repot my peperomias and I kill them, so I'll have to make sure I find it the perfect, most appropriate pot. But yeah, this is really just such a fun little peperomia. I'm super excited to grow it, and hopefully I grow it for many years to come. Let's talk about this one next. So this is a Calathea mosaica, or Calathea mosaica network, because it's the patented variety that Costa Farms grows. So I was just dilly-dallying at the grocery store doing my food shopping, and there were like a bunch of these trending tropicals plants, which of course I've heard of these before, but you know, I never really thought I would run into them. Usually when I go to the stores that have these, and I'm not even looking for these plants, mind you, but I'll see them, and all they'll have is like the fiddly fig and the Peperomia polybotrya that nobody wants. Everybody wants the ZZ ravens and the Calathea mosaicas and whatever else their brand carries. But I saw these and I was like, mine's not nearly that big, and this is only like what? It was like $18. What does it say? It doesn't say, but it was like $18, and that's a deal. So yeah, kudos on them. But you know, it was just kind of silly, you know. You don't go grocery shopping to find your houseplants, but then you know you're a plant person if you see a plant and you're like, damn, I have to buy that. So yeah, but I think it's really cool that they are growing these. You know, it is kind of like a monopolized thing that they're doing when they patent these plants, but whatever, I'm not growing them, so that's not going to affect me in any way. I just think it can affect some other growers and kind of, you know, push them away from growing these things that would obviously sell really well because someone else has a patent on it. So that's a topic for another video. But yeah, always a nice surprise running into one of these beautiful plants while you're just grocery shopping. And I have one more plant to talk about today, which I have grown before in the past, but I've killed it, so I figured it'd be nice to try it once more again because I had stumbled upon it for a decent price. But this is a Cissus discolor. And if you follow me, you know I am a big fan of Cissus. I grow a bunch of different kinds of Cissus in my home, but most of them are much more plain green, and I love my plain green plants. I love my plants that look like a weed, but this one does absolutely not look like a weed. This thing looks much more like a work of art from all of the colors you can see. It's got some like grays and greens and olive colors on the front, and if I turn it around, it's completely wine red. And it's a trailing plant, which is why I have it growing on this little hoop right here. So as you can see, these little vines, they're hopefully gonna grab on and grow around this trellis, and hopefully one day I'll have a very nice full trellis, but I cannot make any promises to myself that, since I have had not so good luck with this plant in the past. But wish me luck with it. This is another one that I don't really have much to say about it because obviously I haven't had very good luck with it. I just know that it wants higher humidity. I know it's not going to like a dry home in the winter when the heat kicks on, so I'm going to make sure that I give this one supplemented humidity. But I'm always using a humidifier in my home in the wintertime anyway, just to make sure that I am supplementing humidity to my plants that are just a little bit more finicky. I think that's all I have to say about this plant, other than asking you guys to wish me luck for growing such a beautiful thing on my second try. So that's gonna about do it for today's video. If you guys have any tips on any of these plants I'm clearly nervous about growing, be sure to leave them in the comments. I'm very curious. Otherwise, thank you guys so much for watching. If you don't already, follow me on Instagram at PhillyFoliage, subscribe to my channel, and I will see you guys in my next video. Have a great day.